Welcome to this episode of Rare D Conversations, where we are delighted to have with us Domenico Coviello, Sofia Douzgou, Chimpen and Siddharth Banka. This continues our theme of connecting with international guests during lockdown, and what better way to start than with an introduction in Italian?
Volevo dire che alcune volte le parole che non si possono tradurre sono le parole migliori di una lingua. Il fatto che non poteva tradurre commuoversi mi ha commosso anche di più, perché commuoversi è questa sensazione di muovere insieme, quindi non c'è una tradizione. Alcune volte le lingue sono troppo belle per essere tradotte.
So thank you, and thank you, Domenico, for taking the time.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Especially in these very unusual times, actually, to talk to us. But it's great to be able to connect and have this opportunity to share our stories. If you could introduce yourselves, that would be great, actually, Domenico.
Yes, thank you for inviting me, first of all. And I am a medical doctor, and my first specialty was pediatrics. And then I got involved in genetics and little by little more and more in molecular genetics. So this is why now I am directing this diagnostic lab. And we moved recently from Galliera Hospital, as you said, from Gaslini Institute. So I'm working now in a research institute, is a children's hospital. And so this I'm doing this work both with genetic syndrome and both also with some adult genetic condition. And of course, as all of us, we are involved now in the genomic era. So I've been working quite a lot in European Society of Human Genetics. I've been head of the education committee, and I did a lot of work helping disseminating the idea that genetic counseling was very important, not done only by medical doctors, but especially by genetic counselors. So I was involving Heather Skirton in our committee, and in the end we had also a genetic counselor as a president of our European Society. I've been working also in the Italian Society of Human Genetics and dealing with patients doing genetic counseling, mainly on the diagnosis we are doing. And at least I like to work with the patient association, but has happened, any doctor maybe in the end join one special association. So my special association is Sotos Syndrome Association.
Okay, thank you. There's a slight, I don't know if your microphone, I wonder if it's, because it's rubbing on your collar a bit, there's a slight kind of ruffle. And there's lots of points there that I'd love to go back to and kind of explore a little bit more. But I first wanted to ask you about where your interest came with, you said you started off with pediatrics. I wanted to ask you about where your interest came with genetics. What triggered that interest?
Well, when I was a medical in my pediatric specialization, I got into osteogenesis imperfecta. So this was, at that time, was one of the first diseases after thalassemia, of course, where some genes were found and where the pathogenetic genes were found, and so the molecular diagnosis was performed. So this was what attracted me, the attention, and going toward the molecular.
And when did that interest start? What year did you start to think about OI?
Just in the clinic, because here I did my specialty in this institute where I'm now, Gaslini Institute. So I was a young doctor and following, and so there was a seminar in this institute, and we had a guest from New York, was an Italian researcher, and he was specialized on osteogenesis imperfecta. So he was giving this seminar showing us how he was able to figure out the defect on collagen gene. And so this was when you start to think we can do something more now, not only clinic, but also molecular diagnosis. And so my thesis of the specialty I did on osteogenesis imperfecta and on these new methods to do the molecular diagnosis.
I have quite a few friends with OI because they're kind of part of the dwarfism community. I think they flick between, like you were saying before, about different groups, but we have conventions kind of all over the world, and quite a few families with OI come with their children, or kind of so there's a particular couple in America who have just actually, they have 2 children that don't have OI, and then they've just adopted a little boy with achondroplasia. So they're a very diverse family genetically. So that's brilliant, thank you. And you also talked about genetic counselling, and obviously that's something that I'm very familiar with here in Manchester. Could you tell me a little bit about where your kind of, why you think it's so important, why you think genetic counselling is so important within the context of medicine?
Well, I was always been attracted in medicine to speak with people, with patients. And indeed, my first idea when I was medical student, I want to do psychiatric. Then I got into genetics, and so I follow genetics. But one thing that you really feel when you get into patient is that even if technology is going faster, is doing some advance, still, and especially in complex situations, still you need a lot of communication. So there is nothing that you can do better for the patient that speak with them, have more communication. So this is what I do personally, I mean, in my life, and so also in my profession. So, and when I met Heather Skirton and I met genetic counselor, I realized that medical doctors generally in Europe do not have enough education for communication. Mm-hmm. So this was my impression. So I said, we have to join forces. We cannot do everything alone. So I was supporting the genetic counselor idea in Europe. And France was the first nation that approved the master in genetic counselor within the health system. So many other countries in Europe, well, some have, others do not yet recognize this profession. And so, but I believe that this was important. Not able to give the solution to a patient, but at least be with the patient in the life. I mean, so.
This is really, really interesting for me as a psychologist, because we have this kind of professions that everybody can do a little bit of that, isn't it? You are a medic and you need to communicate. You are doing, you are a social worker and you need to communicate. You might be even a technician and you need to communicate, or you might be a journalist and you need to communicate. So I'm just wondering, why would you say it's been important for you within the medical context that this genetic counseling becomes almost a specialty or a profession, or there is something slightly different of what you can do as a doctor in communication with families?
Well, I always have been approaching my profession not like a duty, but like a vocation. So I like to do what I do. So I'm not so. And if you like to do your job, you want also feel. You want that you feel good while you are working. And so how you can feel good if the person you have in front of you is not really communicating with you. So this is what I've been doing in my life. So so even if I'm doing a good job on the bench with experiment or with diagnosis, then this does not have so much meaning if these do not arrive to the patient in the correct way. And so I see that even when all my diagnostic tools are not able to define anything, if I explain this to the family, they will understand that anyway you are taking care of them.
Mm.
And that relationship of communication was key. I don't think I would have my two children or be where, in the position that I am today if she hadn't have followed me in that journey and communicated all of the things that were not always scientific, because I didn't really care about the science. I cared about kind of, I cared about what was going to happen to my family and how we were going to kind of look in the future. And
so this is, I think, the difference among doctors. There are many doctors who they are struggle because they want to give a medication or to cure the disease. But this is not all. I mean, so you can even accept the disease if your life is fine. I mean, with other things. So this is why I said I am a medical doctor. I'm not doing medicine. I'm doing laboratory and more counseling now.
I hear so many other doctors that we've been interviewing in this podcast about almost the influence that the patients had, patients or people who live with different conditions. We could be a bit longer in this debate about what we call people. But anyway, people influencing you, the people who consult with you, coming to you for advice, but you also learning from them and maybe shaping the way you are a doctor with them. And I hear that a little bit when you're talking now. Is this the case?
Yes, absolutely. The first condition that I was dealing with was Down syndrome, because it was the most common. So I get in touch with many family, with many children, and I learned from them how, they was telling me that in many cases they had a better life after having a child with Down syndrome, because they realized what was important in the life. So I learned a lot, yes.
It's so good to hear that. I spend a lot of these episodes kind of quietly banging that drum, when I'm talking of kind of that it's not always about the cure or the treatment, or it's about the lived experience of that condition, and we'll all have those different lived experiences, and it's not always something that is negative or that needs to be changed.
We hope you are enjoying the podcast so far. Please subscribe, rate, and review. Continue to follow our conversations where we discover that rare means different things to different people.
Can you tell us a bit about your teaching and in what context you're teaching?
Well, yes, I'm teaching. I was teaching some years ago at medical school when I was in Genova. Then I changed city. I was in Modena for 3 years. Then I was in Milano for almost 10 years. Now I'm back in Genova. Now I'm teaching to School of Biology. So I'm teaching mainly people then go to laboratory. But also some biologists can do the specialty of genetics and do genetic counseling. So teaching for me was important, and I try to communicate to the student that they should learn, of course, knowledge about disease, about technology. This is quite important, but this will be without any meaning if they do not understand why they are doing this. So I always recommend to students to ask many questions. So if they decide to do something, why they are doing this, and also the consequence on their life and on the life of people that are around them. Now, being a little older, not so old yet, but I mean, I know that we need young people for new invention, for new therapy. And our duty is to keep young people understand that is important. Technology is important, changing what you can do, but is even more important, remember who we are. And who is human. I mean, what does it mean? And so, because of course there is technology together with the society, the consumist society, tend to give a wrong message to young people. So the wrong message is that you can do whatever you want, you can be perfect, you can cure everything, and you should be strong, and so on. And this is not a real thing. So this is why I think that teaching together with the knowledge of science is also knowledge of human. So this is why I like to speak. Maybe I'm speaking too much now.
No, no.
We're both going to jump in because I know we both have questions. So you go, Angela.
Well, listening to this almost dance between the young people that they're coming to the laboratory learning in a certain way, and your history and your story of being a doctor and being other things, a part of being in a lab, makes me think about also the difference that the culture or maybe the traditions or the politics of your country might have a voice on the evolution of this laboratory, even, or the way science will grow in Italy, but also in Europe, I suppose. Is there something you want to add to that or say in relation to that?
Well, I believe really a lot in considering the human being not a single thing. So I think that the one person doesn't mean anything. I mean something if I am part of a community. Instead, the message nowadays is the contrary. Everything is on you. You are the center. You are, but I'm sure that we should go back and teach. Then I am important if I am part of a community. So this is the point. So
can I check, where do you think you learned that from, or what is the story?
From my family.
Any particular thing from your family?
Well, you know,
is it okay to ask that?
Yeah. No, it's fine. But you know, being a little older, I start to have more motion. You know, I don't know how to say in English, but mi commuovo facilmente. I mean, so.
Yes, we understand.
So the family of my father, because they were 7 children, 6 male and 1 female. And they were a poor family in the south. And so my father was teaching me how helping each other, they were able to construct their life. I mean, and go on and give all my cousins have gone to university, and so. So my father mind is a little bit, you know, they are not anymore with us. So, but I learned from my family. So, and this is what I want to transmit to my children.
And your students, maybe.
Yes, but now I have special students. My nephew, so my grandchildren, we say in English, my grandchildren. So I have 4 grandchildren already.
Wow.
So.
Wow.
So I have 3 children and 4 grandchildren. So I think that this is what we need to defend, community and family. So the family, if you have a family, you can be also single, but be part of a community. So if we lost this really important part of humanity, then everything is not going well, in my opinion.
And you've kind of mentioned it, but I just wanted to kind of ask a direct question about that. Is what you think it means to be human? You know, if
be aware that, as I told you, you are not alone, and your life is, at least I believe really that my life is based on love that I can give people and I can receive from people.
It's, I don't want to break this nice moment, but you are, you know, in connection to your students, and what you're doing now is also quite related to this technology. You know, it's the balance between the values, you understand, and you invite your students to see that this is connected to being a human. But technology is really going quick, as we know, and how this technology had helped you in any way to keep up with the values.
We need to improve technology, so we have not to be scared about technology, but we should be aware that then somebody should regulate how to use this technology. This is the point.
We were saying that with Nicola, we were preparing for this conversation today. How do we invite you to also talk about the people in the margin? Just wondering, whether we can move towards that, Nick, in terms of thinking about COVID and how this might have been influencing your practice.
This has been a big problem, and especially for association with genetic condition. I was following friends and families, and was very, very hard. It was very hard because being kept at home with children, with many of them have intellectual disability, was quite a lot disrupting their life because they cannot go out, had to change most of their timing in the day. And even now that they can go out, I had contact with many family, they are afraid to go out now. So there's been like a little bit of regression toward how to behave with people. So this was quite impressing me, this part. And so I was, because many therapy were not followed properly anymore because people could not access hospital every day like they did before. So this was quite, and now we will start to work on starting again on this.
It's really interesting because I kind of know two of those strands of rare conditions and how COVID's affected. And I think absolutely you're right that it's a lot of people, particularly parents of children with rare conditions, have lost that confidence to go back out in society and almost have that kind of fight again, you know, like for accessibility and for education. And, you know, everyone's a little bit exhausted. And then also on the other side, I know many adults with rare conditions that mean that their kind of life is very similar to our life in lockdown anyway. You know, that they have to stay at home, that they're not able to go to the cinema, they're not able to go to the theatre. And actually what COVID has done is made all of those things that were inaccessible to them accessible. And lots of people are kind of saying, I hope that continues, that they continue to do the theatre online, that we can all watch a performance and we don't have to travel to the theatre, or, you know, that they continue to make everything accessible that wasn't accessible before, because people living with COVID have had a tiny glimpse into what it feels like to have a rare condition or a rare disease. And I think there has been two really interesting strands, particularly for people with rare genetic conditions, that have highlighted some issues that hopefully we'll remember when everything goes back to whatever normal is.
I'm just wondering whether we are reaching this moment where we can invite more people in the conversation, Nick. What do you think?
Yeah.
I really like the idea that Sofia, Sid, and Carlos, you come from very different backgrounds historically and also in work experience, most probably. And it would be nice to hear and see from you the kind of things that catch your attention. And I'm just wondering if it is okay if I start with Sofia. Is this okay, Sofia?
Absolutely.
Thank you for being so patient and being listening. And I'm just wondering whether there is a particular word or expression that Domenico, I'm sure there are many and you can mention them, but it would be nice if we can concentrate in one of them, of the kind of things that Domenico said.
Mm-hmm.
You were listening.
So if I pick, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. This is a lovely conversation, and it is extremely nice for me to hear Domenico, who is in Italy at the moment, and to listen to how his experience is of the entire situation, being a geneticist in the middle of a COVID-19 crisis. So if I'm going to choose words from what Domenico said, I would choose weak. The fact that he chose weak, then I will choose community, and I will choose technology. Mm-hmm. And I kind of perceived from what Domenico was saying, this change, this tsunami that practically involves all these three things at the same time, and it shows at the same time how these three things interact. Mm-hmm. So I think for, how exceptionally Domenico described the situation and his personal experience of this, how this is a great change for a clinician who cares for their patients and who is part of a personal, human, scientific, educational, and clinical community. Mm-hmm. So
let me sorry, not interrupt you, but go back a little bit for the words again. So the kind of, I really like this idea that you are combining all these weak, community, and technology. Would that be the three that you?
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if I can invite you to imagine something with that. Is there, if an image would come to you in the combination of these three words of what Domenico was kind of
yes, more than, I mean, I'm not sure I could come up with an image like this, but it's like a narrative or a tale,
story,
meaning that a story. So what I see here is an evolving journey of how we deal with vulnerability, still making part of a community. And I think that this is changing, and I'm learning as, again, a human being, a clinician, and a part of this world, and I am being taught, and education is a huge part of this, through technology, from my patients who have been pioneers in how to deal with vulnerability.
Yeah.
So I think this situation for me diagnoses that we have to become better in defining vulnerability on many levels. It's not just the fact, technology is just the means. And technology was devised to help the weak. It was devised to reach out to people who need it most. And it is more, I think, I can definitely speak about this with a different background compared to Domenico or to what, I just heard. And I completely also see this other viewpoint about how we define the weak, for example, in a more westernized society compared to a more Mediterranean society. And, I'm only I really dislike generalizations. I agree with Domenico that each human being is a complex entity and cannot be taken down to numbers. But there is some cultural background there, that we cannot ignore. And we cannot ignore that as clinicians. Because when I see patients, in the clinic, and we discuss the vulnerability of a rare condition, this is a discussion that we need to have in a context.
Yes. But also the nice thing, or the interesting thing I'm hearing, is that in this weak community technology that caught your attention, you are saying that the vulnerability of the people who come to see you, the patients, now has a different light, or a different power, or even a different influence, and there is something you're learning from them. Is this what you're saying?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, again, going back to what Domenico said, Domenico talked a lot about influences. In his cases, it was influences of, other professionals that, from what I heard, were quite international. So there was someone coming from abroad to Italy who influenced his career. There was a colleague who kind of, again, was taught about a new skill, not in Italy and abroad, and again influenced, you know, how things would go on. And I think we need to use this technology to influence us. We need to use this, you know, this incredible means that we have to get more influences, more positive influences. We will also get negative ones. But I think education is central in that. So I'm not sure what I would not pick from, or I would not choose from Domenico's talk is the regulation part. So I would rather have education rather than regulation.
Can I say one thing? Can I ask you one thing more? You know, I'm sure you listen many things, but especially in this, the thing that caught your attention of we, community and technology, how do you think you will be starting to do things or thinking things a little bit different because you've been listening Domenico here, or you've been in this conversation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So first of all, I think we need to pause and think. And I think, you know, admitting this in a situation or let's say background or a society where everything is on doing or on numbers or on producing or being effective or efficient, I think we really need to pause and think. And this is not easy. It's not easy, but we really need time for this. And the second thing that I would say is that what I am learning at the moment is to respect each other's journey to vulnerability.
Thank you, Sofia. Thank you. So, Carlos, you've been listening and they've been connecting with many things. Is there still one thing that or that is not being connected so far in terms of what you heard from Domenico?
Well,
that caught your attention?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for allowing me to witness such a brilliant conversation on such a stormy day, because it's a stormy day here in Spain.
It's a stormy day? Oh, well.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Domenico, for sharing with us some of the many stories that I'm sure that you have shared with us. Well, what caught my attention in the first moment was Domenico's interest in studying that rare illness, osteogenesis imperfecta. I know that, I think it's so like that, osteogenesis imperfecta. But even more so, the importance that Domenico gives to talk to patients about how they feel, and how from Domenico interest in psychiatry, and then slowly slide to the approach of genetic counseling, the importance to communicate with patients. No? Well, I think that Dominicos have reached the patient in the right way and know how to explain the information so that the family understand it correctly. Yeah.
No, I'm just wondering, it's interesting probably for you, you know, your background, that I also felt interested in the fact that he first wanted to be a psychiatrist and then he was pulled into these other, but he's still bringing these ideas, and it seems that is important. I'm just wondering if it came with you an image of this Domenico bringing his interest to the genetics.
Yeah, because there was also I was also struck by the fact that despite working with cells and in a lab, he never stopped thinking about people and how to make them have a better life.
Mm-hmm.
So my image was an helicopter.
A helicopter, yeah.
A helicopter. I don't know why. Maybe this possible to go up and down and see in different perspectives from the ground and then go up. So it's like seeing from the smallest to the biggest. Domenico flies over the ground looking for information through questions to himself and also to his students, keeping the students in mind that technology is important, but more important is understanding who we are. So I don't know, but
it's a nice image.
The helicopter came from my mind.
And how do you think this connects with you also, with your work and your way of being a teacher sometimes?
Oh yeah, well, it's because hearing Domenico's is like gives me hope, knowing that there are professionals who care about the community and get out of the self-centeredness that our culture often puts on medical professionals. And my father taught me that helping people helps to build our lives, and this is something I have wanted to pass on to my children too. And well, my father was a doctor too.
A medical doctor.
A medical doctor, yeah. And he taught me the same thing that Dominic has transmitted to us in this conversation. And maybe that's why I'm a psychologist too. I'm not sure, but maybe. And yes, the idea that we are not alone, and our life is marked by what we give to people and what we receive from people. And we are a community, and we need each other to feel good.
Thank you. And is there a particular thing you will remember soon, or that will stay with you, that you imagine that you will be using in the next few days, maybe, from this conversation?
Well, yes. To hold height my life principle of continuing to help people, to be close to my students. Of course, they are persons like us. It's not a power relationship, just we are community. To remain connected to the values that my father passed on to me. And well, maybe I will also add the message of coming out stronger about the importance of community in our professions. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos.
We hope you are enjoying the podcast so far. Please subscribe, rate, and review. Continue to follow our conversations where we discover that rare means different things to different people.
Thank you. We will have a moment to kind of finish up everybody's voice if we want. But I would like to ask also, Sid, if this is okay with you. I'm just wondering whether there isn't a particular thing you stayed with you from the conversation.
Yes, indeed. So there were lots of things which I could connect to, and I think the thread really is about technology again, and how events or thoughts, feelings, how do they influence the decisions that you take in life, and what sort of almost like a culmination of activities. So there are lots of things which are going on in my head, and I'll try to articulate that in an understandable way. But first of all, I would just like to emphasize the power of technology, the positive power of technology. So I think we all could feel the emotions that Domenico was going through when he was talking about his family. And that is really amazing that someone sitting thousands of miles away says a few words, and it gives us all goosebumps, right? And that is really possible in a lot of ways. Of course, by the goodness of the person who's speaking, but also because of technology. So that's really, really important. And I probably want to take a slightly sort of a bigger view, almost you could say, about what technology can do for us. So there is something called an overview effect. So that is when astronauts, those who've visited the outer space, they look at the Earth and they see a pale blue dot. And it perhaps represents our planet, our home, but also really the importance of fragility, how fragile humanity is and how fragile life is. And I hope at least those who can see the genome, similarly like you see the Earth, when you see the genome, hopefully that gives, at least to me, it gives an overview effect, that I can see that how fragile the genome is, that actually just a nitrogen atom and a hydrogen atom exchanging places can have so vast consequences for an individual. At the same time, what the important thing is that how similar we all are, whether it's UK, Mediterranean, or Asia or Africa. So there is a huge amount of similarity, and it vastly outweighs the differences that we have. So my hope is that those who have seen the Earth from outside, they've been able to communicate that awe and that sort of preciousness of our planet to rest of the world. Similarly, those who can see the genome are able to convey the preciousness, the similarity, and the fragility to rest of the world. And actually, it perhaps not just is restricted to human beings. It is about all forms of life which exist on the planet. So I completely see and I see the value of education and being able to communicate. So coming back to one of very important points which Domenico raised about importance of communication, or whether it's doctor, whether it's education, whether it's communicator, science communicator, whatever it is, that really is really crucial, because being in awe just by yourself can give you pleasure and thoughts, but actually being able to communicate that with other people around the world is equally important.
See, I just, it's really interesting kind of what caught your attention really in the context of also this image that you evoke in this thing that we are so much similar. I think this comes in, I think in every podcast we've done, thinking about genetics. But I'm just wondering, why do you think that particular thing resonated with you? Why do you think, in terms of what you do or your own story, why that was the thing that connected you so visually, that the emotion of Domenico and the technology connection was possible in this moment?
I think because I grew up in a different culture. I live in a different culture. And I see in genetics, especially all the time, we are focusing on differences, but actually what I've learned is that human values, emotions, aspirations, problems, fear, they are so similar. It doesn't really matter where you're from. It does matter, but still the common sort of humanity thread is same. And finally, coming down to a technology aspect or science aspect, this is all to a large extent fashioned by our genes. And if there is 99.9% is all similar, then of course our emotions and reactions to situations are going to be similar as well. So they are influenced by the culture that you grow in, but absolutely at the core, the fundamental of it is same.
So what do you want to remember from this conversation today? What do you think you will be taking with you?
I'll remember the influence that Domenico's family had on the person that he is now. And I think if we can all sort of remember our roots, that will take us far, actually.
Thank you, all of you. It's been really nice to hear the kind of things you've been hearing, actually. And it would be nice to hear from you, Domenico. I think I've been pronouncing your name not very correctly, and I've been trying to listen from Sofia. Domenico, and instead of Domenico. I don't know, there must be, I do a Spanish twist in it. But yeah, is it okay if I ask you how it was for you to hear them listening?
Yes, this is the first time that I am involved in this kind of initiative, and really makes me happy, because as somebody said before, using the technology to get so close people so far, we are so far in our reality, but we are so close in what we are discussing.
We just met this morning, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think that this is a new hope also for me, that what I'm doing here in Genoa will be useful also far from here. And as also has been said, this condition of COVID made also the impression that really our planet is much near each other. We are not so far. As the virus can travel fast, so now we have technology to travel fast. So we need, and I hope we will be more connected and more near each other, even if we are very far from each other. So this is my lesson from today. It is possible.
It is possible. I like that. Thank you. You know, when you were introducing everybody this morning, Nicola, I saw all this doctor, and I said, it's the first time we do a podcast that everybody is a doctor. What is happening here? We might be very, medical or all jargon.
Did you hear my very insecure joke, which was, I don't know anything about medicine or science, which is very, because that was my vulnerability, thinking, oh my God, there's all these doctors and I don't know anything. And I felt the same, but actually, I think I know what you're going to say.
You say it.
No, you say it.
That actually was really nice, and we could talk and learn. And I think it's a podcast for both doctors and people who are maybe at the receiving end of that vulnerability, because maybe we are all in that receiving end of that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to this episode of our Rare D series. This was the last episode we recorded under lockdown and via Zoom. It's been so good to be able to connect and have conversations with our guests. If you would like to hear more of our episodes, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, where you can rate and subscribe. You can also access the series through our website, rared.com. We love hearing from our listeners, and if you would like to continue the conversation, please give us a follow on Twitter, @WhitworthGroup, where we would love to hear your thoughts on the topics we've discussed or other episodes that have captured your attention. This podcast has been made possible by our brilliant team.
Rona McLeod,
Ramona Moldovan,
Jay Roach,
Maria-Angels Ferrin,
Nicola Garda,
Fiona Oof,
Nick Jordan.